Hi, everybody, and hi there, Daryl. I'm going to quickly introduce Daryl to anyone who's listening in. I'm Eileen O'Mahony. I'm the General Manager here at WM We're a UK-based software consultancy, and I'm joined today by Daryl Kelly, who's a technical architect and infrastructure specialist at TD Synnex. Daryl, thanks for making the time to chat today. We're talking about SAP's plans to end support for SAP ERP, what that means for those users. We're chatting about SAP migration options, and more specifically, where does Red Hat Linux fit into all of this, and so on. Can I just begin, Daryl, by chatting to dates? Can you just tell me what dates we're looking at?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Eileen, because there's been a fair bit of confusion because the dates have changed. So just to explain, SAP S4 HANA is SAP's new ERP suite, and that runs exclusively on SAP's HANA database. So SAP is actually ending support for its Enterprise Central component, its old ERP system, in 2027. And the reason that there's been some confusion around it is because the original plan was actually to end in 2025. But in 2020, over the pandemic, SAP extended that support deadline. So the date now is 2027.
Right. Okay. So we know anyway that enterprises that want SAP support, they have to migrate to S4HANA. And
Mhm.
it might seem like 2027 is really far away, but actually, for an enterprise-wide solution, that's not actually a whole lot of time. So really, you either need to be migrating or have a migration plan in place right now.
Mhm.
There's a couple of different migration options, and we will look at those later. But I did think it'd be a good starting point for us is to talk about where Red Hat Enterprise Linux plays into this migration.
Yeah, so historically, SAP's ERP system worked with multiple different databases. So you could use Oracle, DB2, SQL, or even SAP's own MaxDB.
Mhm.
But that changes with S4 HANA. So that runs exclusively on the HANA database. And in turn, that HANA database runs exclusively on Linux. And so, what that means is there's actually only two supported operating systems. One of those is SUSE, SLES, and the other is Red Hat Enterprise Linux as your choices for running HANA.
Okay, right. So, and I know that SAP recommends RHEL for HANA deployments.
Hmm.
There's obvious reasons. It's known for its stability, performance, strong support model, and so on. Now, actually, here at WM Promos, we are vendor agnostic here, but we're big fans of RHEL. The team are really comfortable with it. Like most people, we really like the flexibility it offers in terms of scaling, whether that's on premise or in hybrid cloud environments. Um, but Daryl, what's your take on specific features of RHEL that would make it a strategic choice for S4 HANA?
Yeah, so I mean, Rail has been optimized to work really well with SAP HANA. In particular, there's been some kernel tuning to enhance the, memory management and performance. And I think, on top of that, Red Hat and SAP have a really long-standing and strategic partnership. So, of course, there's all kinds of support systems and best practices in place that are tailored specifically for S4 HANA running on Rail.
Right. Okay. And so I'm curious, are there any specific configurations we should focus on when setting up a RHEL environment for SAP HANA?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the key things is, memory is really critical. HANA is an in-memory database. So, ensuring that you have that kind of optimal memory allocation and that kernel tuning is really essential. And Red Hat and RHEL have SAP specific packages. And those include all of those kind of performance tuning and monitoring tools that are really invaluable when you're running these HANA environments.
Right. And so just talking about monitoring and so on, what about failover? I mean, for many of our clients, well, for most people, uptime is priority.
Yeah, absolutely. These are really critical business systems, aren't they? So uptime is, of course, a priority. And, SAP solutions from Red Hat provides pre-configured high availability clustering, which will kind of help in those failover scenarios. In fact, Rail's high availability add-on is specifically tuned for SAP, including HANA. So it provides that automated failover and helps minimize your downtime. So definitely support those uptime requirements. And the other thing is you can actually configure it across multiple nodes. So, and that's including whether you're on-premise or using cloud instances, for example.
Okay, great. So I'm glad you mentioned about the automated failover and so on. But that's a key feature. What about updates and patching? So we're aware that security patches and kernel updates need to be managed very carefully. So you want to avoid disrupting the SAP application. How does Rail handle that?
It's a great question. So Red Hat and Rail have a tool called Red Hat Insights. And what that tool does is provide proactive analytics and alerts around potential issues. And then around kind of patch management, there's also live kernel patching. So you can apply those critical patches without needing a reboot, which is obviously ideal for SAP workloads where that uptime is really critical.
Yeah.
Talking about insights, I'm curious. Do you find that many of your clients use insights?
Oh, well, some of our clients do use it. We use it here ourselves. And with others we're busy flying the flag and trying to persuade them to see the value of it, especially in production, because it's a game changer for managing vulnerabilities. And again, back to that thing of avoiding unplanned downtime, that constant theme of uptime being critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Insights is really interesting because it can help you detect configuration issues, security vulnerabilities, and even offer like tuning recommendations for those SAP workloads. And I think it's really critical because S4 HANA environments tend to be quite complex. So having those analytics behind you can be really powerful.
Yeah, I'm glad we've touched on insights. But what about other Red Hat solutions? Because it does seem that Red Hat have genuinely invested in making Rail hugely supportive of an organization's decision to run SAP. So what else is there we should consider?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. The first is that Red Hat offer more than one subscription option around Rail for SAP. There is a lightweight version called Rail for SAP Applications, or a fully fleshed out solution, which is Rail for SAP Solutions. Now, the latter of those includes a whole bunch of Ansible roles. So you can do things like help prepare your systems for SAP workloads to, install SAP software. You can do things like perform the local configuration of each system. And it gives you the ability to kind of store and initiate configuration of SAP systems from a central location.
Okay.
And on top of that, you get access to Red Hat Satellite,
Right.
which is essentially kind of a central management console for all RHEL instances, whether they're running SAP or not. So you can manage security, you can manage patching and the life cycle of machines from one central place.
And so there'll be lots of people out there who are currently running Rail and they're getting access to things like Insights and Satellite and so on. What about organizations where the starting point isn't Red Hat Linux?
Yeah, and I think, obviously planning is key. And it might be that you're coming from a different platform. Although that may not apply in every organization's case, it's kind of good to know that Red Hat have got extensive documentation and SAP notes to support migrations from other Linux distributions, and in fact, even Windows.
Yeah. So, and I suppose that's important because, people can be running different, they'll all have different starting points. And for those already on Linux, it does look like it's pretty straightforward. And the good thing is there's tons of SAP notes available. Now, back to also environments. What about cloud compatibility? So many organizations nowadays are considering like a hybrid setup with some components in AWS or Azure or whatever, and some stuff on premise. What about that?
Yeah, so RHEL is actually compatible with all the major cloud providers. So that includes AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and some of those, for example, running RHEL on AWS, have images which are specifically optimized for SAP HANA. They're designed to handle those in-memory workloads. RHEL also integrates, as you would expect, really, really well with Red Hat's Ansible automation platform. So you can automate the deployments and configurations of the machines, whether you're on-premise or in the cloud.
That's ideal, really. I mean, automation in the pipeline is what everyone should be aiming towards, especially as they scale. So it's good. We're touching on lots of different things. Now, what about support? I'm pretty clear RHEL offers SAP specific support.
Yeah, so Red Hat have an SAP specific support agreement. So, when you run into issues, their team's really well versed in the technology and is really able to kind of help you. One of the interesting things I think actually is that Red Hat actually offers some extended support for SAP, which is, really a clear acknowledgement that Red Hat appreciate how critical SAP is for organizations. And by offering that extended support, they allow you to kind of minimize the changes. So you can stay on a minor version for far, far longer. In fact, it's actually up to 4 years.
Right. That's perfect, really, because it's the joint support from SAP and Red Hat that gives a lot of confidence moving forward with RHEL. Daryl, thanks. That's great. Now, I did say I'd come back to it. There's the actual SAP application migration options. That's something we should think about.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of depends on where you're starting from and where you want to get to. It might be that right now you're kind of keen to clean up your SAP environment and your setup, and maybe this feels like the right time to do that.
Yeah, you're right. And some clients are looking at adopting a greenfield approach. I mean, basically, they're starting all over again with a new implementation. It gives you some obvious advantages. It gives an opportunity to correct overly complex workflows, or to decide now to install on cloud, or have a hybrid of that on premise, or tidying up code, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's not going to suit everyone.
No. And I mean, we talked about change. There's going to be organizations that are super keen to minimize the amount of change that's going on. And for them, the brownfield approach, really, essentially a system conversion is what they're looking at. Now, that's whether you convert your existing ERP system to S4HANA, where you convert your existing ERP system to S4HANA, you can deploy it on premise, on cloud, and so on. But your workflows aren't changing. Now, of course, you could opt for having a selective data transition where you're moving some, but not all, the configuration and data from your old ERP system to a new SAP S4HANA instance. That you'll also have an option, of course, to merge multiple ERP systems. As you say, it really does depend on where you're starting and what your business aims are. And regardless of which option you go for, SAP do provide lots of content and tools to support your planning and your implementation. I mean, the key thing is really that you need to get started now. 2027 isn't actually that far away for something as big as this. And everyone has to keep their eye on the horizon, what they really need to be getting ready for, while the competition are coming over their shoulder. Daryl, it was great that you were here today. I feel like we've touched on lots of really good nuggets of information.
Yeah, thanks, Eileen. Thanks for having me. It's been a really good conversation, and I'm glad we had a chance to touch on a load of these topics.
Before I say goodbye, I'm actually going to just do a couple of the key takeaways we have. So one is SAP S4HANA on RHEL. It's a certified platform. You mentioned optimized kernel tuning and memory management. Fabulous. You also talked about high availability and failover, that it's got built-in clustering. We talked about the extra bits that come, Red Hat Insights for monitoring, live kernel patching, and so on. And that gives you proactive management, which is critical. You mentioned about compatibility. You said support for AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and the plugins like automation with Ansible. And then one of the last things we talked about, which is critical, is that collaborative support model, where you have SAP and Red Hat working so closely together. And I suppose the key takeaway is you need to get started now. We're here, myself and Daryl. Please feel free to reach out to us. Migration is something we've lots of experience in, and we're happy to help. Bye for now.